We were promised paradise. A world where problems vanish with the swipe of a screen. Where suffering is a glitch, something to be debugged. Where faster means better, and smarter means happier. Yet here we are, scrolling, comparing, dissociating, connected to everything and yet cut off from ourselves. What if the real cost of progress is the soul? We engineered convenience but lost meaning. We achieved abundance and bred anxiety. We killed pain and now feel nothing. This isn't just a modern dilemma. Fyodor Dostoevsky saw it coming more than a century ago. In a world obsessed with logic, he wrote about chaos. In an era drunk on utopia, he wrote from the underground. He didn't reject progress. He warned what happens when it becomes our new god. Because when we worship the machine, we forget what it means to be human. Dostoevsky asked, "What is man without suffering? Perhaps he is not even a man." And maybe, just maybe, the thing we're trying to eliminate is the very thing that makes us real. So here's the question. Is progress making us freer, or just more efficient slaves in a prettier prison? Only those ready to question the myth will keep watching. In 1864, Dostoevsky published a strange, furious little book called Notes from Underground, not to entertain but to provoke. It wasn't a story. It was a rebellion in monologue form, a rant, a confession, a scalpel cutting through the heart of every progressive dream. At its center is a man who despises reason. He mocks logic, sabotages his own happiness, and even admits to doing things that humiliate him, just to prove he's still free. He knows what's good for him. He knows what's expected. And he chooses the opposite every time. Why? Because he wants to feel like a man, not a formula. This character, bitter, contradictory, and strangely captivating, was Dostoevsky's warning. Not just about his time, but ours. Because the more we try to make life rational, predictable, and efficient, the more we risk losing what makes us human. The freedom to be unpredictable, to suffer, to choose badly. In his world, there were thinkers who believed mankind could be engineered into harmony. Give people logic, comfort, and structure, and they'll become angels. No more war, no more contradiction, no more chaos. Dostoevsky didn't just disagree. He saw it as a death sentence for the soul. He imagined a utopia, a crystal palace, where everything was clean, optimized, mathematically perfect. And then he imagined a man, full of spite and absurdity, who looked at this paradise and smashed a brick through its window, just to prove he could. Because that one irrational act is more human than 1,000 perfectly rational decisions. The underground man says, "I say let the world go to hell, but I should always have my tea." It sounds ridiculous, but it isn't. It's a cry for individuality in a world obsessed with systems. A refusal to be reduced to inputs and outputs. And here we are, over 150 years later, building our own digital palaces. We automate, we optimize, we live by algorithms that tell us who to date, what to buy, when to sleep, what to feel. And still, something inside us rebels. Have you ever noticed that strange urge to self-sabotage, even when everything's going well? That impulse to ruin a good thing? To pick the wrong choice on purpose? That's the underground speaking, that primal voice reminding us we are not machines. Because progress, if it comes at the cost of complexity, is not progress. It's programming. Dostoevsky's underground man is toxic, cynical, petty, but brutally honest. And in that honesty, he reveals a truth modern culture keeps trying to suppress. That the human soul doesn't want perfection. It wants meaning. And meaning often comes with pain. Dostoevsky didn't glorify suffering. He simply believed that when we erase it entirely, we risk erasing the very texture of life. A person who never bleeds, never breaks, never questions, that's not a liberated being. That's a tool. Progress promises a life without suffering. But a life without suffering is also a life without depth, without transcendence, without the need to reach beyond the self. And so the underground man remains, angry, disillusioned, painfully self-aware, as a shadow over every shiny new promise of the future. A reminder that beneath all our upgrades, we are still creatures of contradiction, and that to be fully human is to embrace the part of us that no system can fix. We say we want freedom, freedom to choose, freedom to speak, freedom to live however we want. But Dostoevsky asked, what if we don't actually want freedom? What if freedom terrifies us? In The Brothers Karamazov, he wrote one of the most chilling scenes in all of literature, the tale of the Grand Inquisitor. Christ returns to earth, silent, humble, and full of love, but the church arrests him. The Inquisitor visits him in the night and tells him, "We don't need you anymore. You gave people freedom and they didn't want it. They want bread. They want order. They want to be told what to do." He says, "In the end, they will lay their freedom at our feet and say to us, 'Make us your slaves, but feed us.'" That's the paradox Dostoevsky saw so clearly, that people will trade spiritual freedom for comfort, safety, and certainty, not because they're evil, but because the weight of real choice is unbearable. And if you look at the modern world, hasn't that prophecy come true? We've never had more choices, infinite shows to stream, dozens of identities to wear, 1,000 products, opinions, and paths. But we've also never been more lost. Because freedom without grounding doesn't liberate us, it drowns us. We think we're free because we can choose between 23 kinds of cereal or 10 dating apps. But real freedom isn't about options. It's about meaning. And meaning requires commitment, sacrifice, limits. We scroll because we can't choose. We ghost because we fear connection. We chase novelty because we're terrified of stillness. In giving us everything, modernity has given us nothing we truly know how to hold. Progress tells us we're autonomous individuals, that we don't need faith, tradition, or community. Just you do you. Just follow your truth. But Dostoevsky saw the danger of that lonely autonomy. He saw that when man makes himself the center of the universe, he collapses under the weight of it. And it's happening now. We were told that tearing down institutions would make us freer. But now we're isolated, addicted, and anxious. We don't trust each other. We don't trust ourselves. And in that void, we crave authority. Not conscious authority, but hidden algorithmic control. The soft tyranny of personalization. The silent hand that curates our feeds, shapes our desires, and makes the hard decisions for us without asking. We want to be free, but not if it means being responsible. We want meaning, but not if it demands suffering. We want love, but not if it makes us vulnerable. So we drift, numbed by endless options, worshipping comfort while calling it liberation. But Dostoevsky knew, freedom is not comfort. It is agony. It is risk. It is the terrifying possibility of failure, of sin, of redemption. And only in that space, in the raw tension of real choice, can the soul emerge. Modernity says, build better systems and people will thrive. Dostoevsky replies, no, give people something worth suffering for, and only then will they come alive. The greatest threat to freedom isn't tyranny. It's the illusion that we've already achieved it, when we've merely handed it over to the gods of ease and entertainment. So we must ask ourselves, are we really free? Or have we just forgotten what freedom costs? We're more advanced than ever, more connected, more informed, more entertained. And yet, we're crumbling on the inside. Anxiety is no longer an exception, it's the norm. Depression hides behind curated smiles. Narcissism is disguised as self-branding. We were told we were evolving, but emotionally we're fragmenting. This isn't a coincidence. It's the cost of a culture built on stimulation, not meaning. We scroll, swipe, perform, all in search of a fleeting hit of attention. Likes, views, followers, modern echoes of applause. And the irony? The more we're seen, the less we feel known. We were promised freedom. What we got was overstimulation. We were promised connection. What we got was comparison. We were promised progress. But no one told us it would feel this empty. Dostoevsky saw this coming. Long before Instagram, long before TikTok, he saw what happens when humans sever their roots to something deeper. In Notes from Underground, the protagonist doesn't just hate himself, he performs his suffering. He obsesses over how he's perceived, imagines conversations that never happened, and sabotages his life just to feel alive. Sound familiar? Modern psychology confirms what Dostoevsky intuited. When our identity depends on external validation, the inner self erodes. When pleasure is constant, purpose becomes unreachable. Social media operates on what neuroscientists call variable reward schedules, the same principle used in slot machines. You never know when the next hit of dopamine will come, so you keep scrolling, keep clicking, keep hoping. But unlike a casino, the house always wins, and the house is your attention. And while the platforms grow richer, we grow more anxious, more fragmented, more performative. We edit our sadness. We monetize our joy. We filter our faces, our thoughts, our identities. But the pain doesn't disappear, it simply goes underground. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls this the burnout society, where we exploit ourselves under the illusion of freedom, where pressure comes not from outside authority, but from the internal voice that says, "You're not enough, not yet, try harder, be more." We've become our own slave drivers, constantly optimizing, constantly exhausted. And in the background of all this, the sacred has vanished. Silence, stillness, ritual, reverence. These have no place in the scroll. Dostoevsky knew what happens to a soul that's been flattened by progress. He wrote characters who tried to live without God, without meaning, without a moral anchor. And he didn't show them as villains, he showed them as lost. In the brothers Karamazov, Ivan says, "If God is dead, then everything is permitted." But Dostoevsky wasn't asking a theological question. He was warning about what happens when we lose the vertical dimension, the ability to look beyond ourselves. Because once life becomes horizontal, all surface, all image, the soul suffocates. This is why so many today feel exhausted and empty, despite having everything. Because progress, stripped of spiritual depth, produces comfort without contentment, movement without meaning. And so we search endlessly for what can't be found in a feed, a sense of wholeness, a purpose that doesn't expire in 24 hours, a truth that isn't trending but eternal. Dostoevsky's message wasn't anti-technology. It was anti-forgetting. Forgetting who we are beneath the masks. Forgetting that suffering has something to teach. Forgetting that depth is not a bug in the human system, it's the feature that makes us real. In trying to escape discomfort, we've escaped ourselves. And now we scroll, not forward, but away. There was a time when suffering had meaning. A death wasn't just the end of a life, it was a transition. A silence wasn't just awkward, it was sacred. Pain wasn't a glitch in the system, it was a call to something higher. Today, we anesthetize, we optimize, we distract. We treat suffering like a bug to be patched, not a message to be understood. But Dostoevsky believed that suffering was the soul's last remaining doorway to the divine. He didn't glorify pain, he feared it, he lived it. He nearly died in a Siberian prison camp. But he also saw something most people missed. When you strip life of its sacredness, even comfort becomes unbearable. We traded cathedrals for convenience, rituals for routines, mystery for metrics. And somewhere in that transaction, the human spirit lost its anchor. Modernity told us that God was dead, and for a while we cheered. Now, in the silence, we feel the weight of that absence. What fills the void? Often ourselves. We make gods out of personalities, worship influence, pray for algorithms to smile on us. We've replaced the sacred with the viral. But viral doesn't satisfy the soul. Dostoevsky understood this hunger. In The Idiot, Prince Mishkin, one of his most saint-like characters, says, "Beauty will save the world. Not utility, not productivity, but beauty, the kind that breaks you open and reminds you you're alive." He saw that the sacred isn't necessarily religious. It's the experience of being humbled by something greater than yourself. It's the feeling that life isn't just matter in motion, but meaning in motion. And without that, we sink. Today, we chase purpose through performance, through work, through aesthetic, through metrics. But metrics cannot measure transcendence. An app cannot resurrect awe. We're told to be spiritual but not religious, to vibe but not believe, to meditate but never surrender. We want the benefits of the sacred without the cost. But Dostoevsky knew the cost is everything, because the sacred requires surrender, not to a church or an institution, but to the truth that you are not the center of the universe. And in that surrender, paradoxically, something is born. A strength that isn't rooted in ego, but in humility. A resilience that doesn't come from control, but from letting go. We live in a time where feelings are monetized, where sacred moments are packaged as content, where even grief is algorithmically shaped by what's shareable. But grief, real grief, doesn't go viral. It sits with you in the dark, transforms you slowly, painfully, deeply. Dostoevsky wrote about that kind of transformation. He believed that through suffering, man could see himself clearly, stripped of illusions, humbled by weakness, open to grace. And maybe that's what we've lost. Not God in the institutional sense, but reverence. For life, for each other, for the mystery of simply being here at all. Without that reverence, we become tourists in our own lives, consuming experience but never entering it. So we must ask, what happens to a culture that forgets how to kneel? Not in submission, but in awe? What happens when the only thing we worship is ourselves? We've cured diseases, mapped the genome, automated entire economies. We've walked on the moon, split the atom, and connected the planet. But we still don't know what to do with our pain. We numb it, avoid it, edit it out of the picture. Because somewhere along the way we were told that pain is a problem, something to be solved, erased, or ignored. Not something to learn from, not something to carry with reverence. Dostoevsky saw the danger in that lie. He knew that when suffering is stripped of meaning, it doesn't disappear, it multiplies in silence. He didn't preach despair, quite the opposite. He believed that the deeper the descent into the self, the greater the possibility for redemption. Not through logic, not through comfort, but through confrontation with the rawness of existence. He wrote men who murdered in the name of progress. Men who intellectualized morality and found nothing but a void. Men who reached the end of reason and found, waiting on the other side, the need to believe. And that belief, that trembling step into something larger than ourselves, was, for Dostoevsky, the soul's final rebellion. Today, rebellion looks different. It's not in riots or revolutions. It's in silence. It's in logging off. It's in asking, what have I become in the name of progress? To rebel today is to feel. In a world that medicates every emotion and filters every flaw, to sit with your grief is a form of resistance. To choose integrity over image, stillness over speed, depth over display. We've turned distraction into doctrine, busyness into identity. But the soul knows better. It waits, patient and buried, for the moment when the noise grows unbearable. And in that moment it speaks. Sometimes in a breakdown, sometimes in a quiet walk, sometimes in that strange ache you feel right after your biggest achievement. The ache that says, "Was that it?" That ache is not your enemy. It's your invitation. Because what if Dostoevsky was right? What if freedom without purpose is a kind of hell? What if the absence of suffering doesn't make us whole, but makes us numb? What if the soul, denied of hardship, begins to wither from lack of weight? Real freedom, he believed, is not the ability to do whatever you want. It's the courage to face the truth of what you are, wounded, contradictory, unfinished, and still choose love, still choose responsibility, still choose to rise. Progress has given us power, but it has not taught us how to carry it. We're building faster than we're growing, inventing quicker than we're reflecting. We have gods now, they just don't look like gods. They glow, they recommend, they reward us with attention and punish us with silence. They offer everything except peace. And so the rebellion must begin where the system cannot reach, within. It's not dramatic, it's not loud. It's choosing to live honestly, to suffer without running, to love without performance, to pray even if you don't know who's listening. This is not regression. It's not nostalgia. It's remembering that you are not a machine, that your worth cannot be quantified, that your soul, no matter how buried, still longs for something real. And maybe that longing, that restless, aching, inconvenient longing, is not a flaw in the human system. Maybe it's the proof that we're still alive. What we explored today isn't just about Dostoevsky. It's about you, about the world you walk through every day. The ache behind the scroll, the silence behind your smile, the feeling that something sacred was lost somewhere between the notifications and the noise. If you're still here, still watching, still breathing with this thought in your chest, then maybe you're part of the few who haven't gone completely numb. Maybe your soul still remembers something deeper, something that can't be explained, only felt. And if this video made you stop, even for a moment, then that silence between our words was the most important part. Because silence is where the soul speaks. You don't have to agree with Dostoevsky. You don't have to believe in anything grand or eternal. But if this reflection stirred something in you, protect it. That discomfort, that unrest, that's the part of you they haven't tamed yet. There's more to question, more to feel, more to lose, and more to find. So if you're still searching, you're not alone. We'll keep walking through these videos, these questions, this invisible thread that binds thinkers and wanderers across centuries. If this resonated with you, even in silence, then let that be enough. You don't need to prove it with a like or a comment. But if you feel called to continue this kind of journey, you're invited. Not out of habit, not out of algorithm, but because something in you still believes that the right words at the right time can change everything. We'll meet again in the next reflection, in the next question, in the space between scrolling and stopping. Until then, protect your silence, honor your depth, and don't let the noise convince you that you're alone.